Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching your weekday program, The Daily Debate, here on Nile TV International. For tonight, I am your host, Nancy Sarah Barakat, and up for discussion on tonight's program, we're going to be taking a look at the development of industry in Egypt and the efforts being exerted by the government to create an atmosphere that attracts local and foreign investment alike. We'll also be reviewing the outcomes of the 5th Conference of the Ministers of Trade and Industry of the Group of 8 Developing Islamic Countries, the D8, that was held in Egypt under the auspices of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. During the meeting, the D8 discussed the problems preventing members from cooperating with each other in the field of machine industry and possible solutions to those problems. Also during the episode, we'll be tackling the recent measures taken by the Ministry of Trade and Industry in the field of developing and amending legislation that controls the process of trade and industry here in the country. We'll also be reviewing the outcomes of a meeting which was held between Minister of Trade and Industry and a delegation from the British House of Lords, which aimed at boosting Egyptian-British and Egyptian-European ties. What were the outcomes of the D8 conference? How do my guests evaluate the current status of industry here in Egypt? How far has the government succeeded in attracting more investments to the country? And how will the meeting between the Minister of Trade and the British delegation contribute to boosting Egyptian-British and Egyptian-European ties? That and much more will be discussed later on in the program. But as always, there are top stories that we like to shed light on here, and we start off with Defence Minister Said Subhi, who met today with head of Sudan's military intelligence, Ali Mohammed Salim, to discuss enhancing military cooperation between the two Nile Basin countries. During their meeting, Subhi discussed with Salim issues of common concern when trying to increase military cooperation between the two countries. The duo also reviewed the latest local and regional developments and their impact on security and stability in the African continent. The meeting was attended by a number of Egyptian armed force commanders as well as a Sudanese delegation that travelled to Cairo with Salim. Armed Forces Chief of Staff Mahmoud Higazi also convened with Salim at the headquarters of the Ministry of Defence. Today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told France's foreign minister that Israel remained opposed to a French initiative for an international conference to try and revive peace talks. In public remarks to his cabinet after meeting with France's Jean-Marc Ayrault, Netanyahu said that the only way to advance a genuine peace between Israel and Palestine is through direct negotiations and without preconditions. He claimed that anything other than bilateral talks would give the Palestinians an escape hatch through which to avoid meeting his demand that they recognize Israel as the nation-state of the Jewish people. An international gathering planned for May 30th in Paris is set to include the Middle East Quartet, the Arab League, the UN Security Council, and about 20 countries without Israeli and Palestinian participation. Now, to tell us more and to give us a little bit of an insight as to how he sees the current stalemate, we're being joined by Dr. Musa Sheheda, expert in Palestinian affairs. Thank you very much for your time, Doctor.
It's my pleasure.
Let me start off with how you interpret the remarks made by the Israeli Prime Minister over the peace negotiations.
I actually, when I listened to that, I had a big smile on my face because the man is really full of crap, in other words. For the last 25 years, since 1993 up to now, they've been going only negotiations. And all negotiations have led not only to neutrality or to the square zero, but actually below zero, because every time negotiations take place, more land is confiscated by the Israeli Zionists, and thus leaving no place in the between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean, any place to make what is called a viable state. What do we have today? We have what is called pockets of Palestinian presence separated by roads controlled by the Israelis. So what is he talking about? He wants to go into negotiations for what? For to get more land. Every time if you study the pattern of negotiations, you'll find out every time they end up with negotiations, right after the negotiations, another land is taken over. So the negotiations was nothing but a camouflage for the Israelis to pretend that they seek peace, but they don't seek peace, because peace is known.
But this is, don't you think that this is perhaps the first time that the the Israeli Prime Minister outright says that he sees flaws and he doesn't see a need for negotiations? This is a very blasé sort of attitude that perhaps for the first time we're outright seeing and hearing. And do you think that the international community should take that against him?
But we have been listening to this for quite some time. How many times? Look, at the beginning, recently, he says, we cannot negotiate with the government that has Hamas in it because that's a terrorist organization. When it was split from Gaza, he says we cannot negotiate with a government that half of it is in Gaza without being unified.
Right.
So if they're unified, he's not going to negotiate. If they are not unified, he doesn't want to negotiate, because the purpose is not negotiation, but rather swallowing of more Palestinian land. It's the president. So what he said is not exactly a new invention of Netanyahu. He's been saying that for the last 20 years. I have seen a video of Netanyahu saying, my purpose here is to make sure that the Oslo Accords are totally emptied from its promises of creating what is called two states. There is no place for two states. There is only one state. And here is another ploy which you had just mentioned. He said the only way we negotiate in good faith if the Palestinians recognize Israel as a Jewish state. What does that mean?
Right.
It means every time the Arabs in their demography edge the Israelis and the number of the Arabs versus the Jews, immediately a new resolution will be made whereby the Arabs will be uprooted again and thrown. That's what Tzipi Livni said, that there is no enough place for the Palestinians to stay where they are within Israel itself, and they want to kick them out to come to the enclave or whatever is left of the Palestinians. So the man is a liar. Simple as that.
So let me just finally ask you what you think the outcome of the May 30th talks is, especially that neither party who is involved in the conflict is actually going to be involved in the talks.
I beg your pardon, can you repeat?
The May 30th talks that are scheduled to take place do not involve Israel or the Palestinians. So what do you think the outcome of that?
I can easily predict that and put my money on it too. Total failures. So because the talk about negotiations has taken place so many times, that negotiations has come up with nothing if it was not total disaster to the Palestinian future. As simple as that. I don't think we should take him seriously. The only time we can take him seriously when he makes commitment guaranteed by the United States, guaranteed by the Israelis themselves, that they will honor some kind of a formula that will give space for the Palestinians to survive.
Right. I thank you very much, Dr. Musa Shaheda, expert in Palestinian affairs, for your time and your insights. Now we come for the first report for the evening and a closer look at the Developing Aid Organization for Economic Cooperation Conference, and then we'll be back to discuss that. Do stay with us.
Under the auspices of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Prime Minister Sharif Ismail witnessed the kick-off of the 5th Conference of Trade and Industry Ministers of the Group of 8 Developing Islamic Countries, D8, on the 11th of May 2016. The conference, hosted by Egypt for the first time, was participated by the industry ministers of the group's member states: Egypt, Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey, Iran, Malaysia, and Bangladesh. Secretary General of D8, Said Ali Musavi, a number of senior officials, industry experts, and businessmen. According to head of the Engineering Export Council of Egypt, Amr Abu Frikha, the G8 agreed to carry out 3 joint projects in automotive feeding industry, machinery, and technology. Abu Frikha said that 3 projects were agreed on by the ministers of the G8, their industrial councils, and the EEC. At the meeting of the 5th Ministerial G8 session, Abu Frikha said the company started talks on potential collaboration, adding that an Egyptian-Turkish joint venture venture company will be launched in the field of machinery manufacturing. Furiha said that the talks between the two private Egyptian and Turkish companies would start after the end of the meeting to sign memoranda of understanding to initiate the study of the new company. He added that the EEC developed 10 points in new machinery project proposals to be taken in developing the machinery sector, which includes determining the current situation of machinery production, key performance indicators of each G8 member. Furiha said that G8 also agreed on recommendations for quality standards of newly manufactured and used imported machines for all D8 members. Further, they discussed the problems preventing members from cooperation with each other in the field of machinery industry and possible solutions. Cooperation between these countries must be improved in sub-industries such as manufacture of machinery components. G8 is an organization for development cooperation between Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Turkey.
Be the first to know. The news live at the site of the event. Information on events as they are happening. If it's breaking news, it's Nile TV. For ads on Nile TV, Egyptian Radio and Television Union, the economic sector, info@nileinternational.net, or call us on the following numbers.
دي كل واحد يشتغل بضمير.
كلنا نشتغل، احنا نغير نفسنا بس.
الناس تعامل ضميرها وتعامل مرضي الله،
الناس تبقى كويسه مع بعضيها،
هيبقوا كويسين.
كلنا خير ومصر كلها خير.
هي ام الدنيا، الشعب المصري ده طيب.
لو كل واحد ابتدى بس بنفسه البلد هتتصلح.
كل واحد يعمل ربنا وضميره. الناس تبقى حلوه كده مع الناس.
لازم اخلاق الناس تبقى كويسه.
نحب بعض، الاحترام،
ضماير الناس،
الاخلاق بس.
ان شاء الله ينصلح حالنا بقى.
نتقبل اراء بعض. هي الديمقراطيه، هي الديمقراطيه.
Nile TV International is your gateway to all the breaking news events across the world. We're the most constant news service of the world. We make all the difference.
The entire world is shifting towards social media. That's why we're following you and we're capturing the latest.
We provide you with minute-by-minute updates of the latest events happening around the world.
Reading beyond the news.
Catching the news and following the latest and the most significant events.
You'll still be in the majors. It will be just a different sport.
News updates minute by minute. Where we have been, where we stand now, and where we want to be in the future. Whatever is making the headlines will bring you the story.
وجدت دوما مصر من أشقائها العرب مواقف تبرهن على أخوة حقيقية وصداقة وفية.
زايد بن سلطان حكيم العرب قال لن يكون النفط العربي أغلى من الدم العربي. لا وجود للأمة العربية بدون مصر، ولا يمكن لمصر أن تستغنى عن أمتها العربية.
كانت مصر ولا زالت خط الدفاع الأول عن الكثير من الأخطار التي أحدقت بالمنطقة.
دولة الإمارات ستبقى دائما مع مصر، تضع تضامننا العميق مع جمهورية مصر العربية الشقيقة.
أؤكد مجددا دعم بلادي اللامحدود.
أثبتت الأحداث على مدى تاريخ علاقاتنا رسوخها.
نريد مصر آمنة سالمة قوية مزدهرة. نحن مع مصر.
قوة مصر وعزتها هي قوة وعزة الأمة العربية والإسلامية.
جمهورية مصر العربية الشقيقة كانت ولا تزال وستظل قلب الأمة النابض وحصنها المنيع.
تحديات كبيرة، لكن مصر أكبر من كل التحديات.
خالص الشكر والتقدير باسمي وباسم شعب بلادي.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome here in the studio Dr. Alaa Al-Shazi, Professor of Economics. Thank you very much for coming in tonight. Also joining me is Dr. Ahmed Abd Al-Mughni, Finance and Investment Expert. Thank you very much for coming in. Dr. Ahmed, let me start off with you and perhaps your overall views about the Conference of Trade and Industry between the Ministers of D8 that was recently held here.
We have seen a lot of cooperation initiatives, and we have seen talks and ideas about establishment of industrial zones and the advancement of bilateral and multilateral trade. And this is important for three factors: to improve the standard of living of the people, of the nations, and this is the ultimate goal. And in the short term, improve the economic trade, and in the medium term, to improve investment and development projects that have mutual interest and build development for the nations.
Right. Let me put the same question to you, Dr. Alaa, and your overall views perhaps of the meeting that took place between the D8 Ministers of Trade and Industry.
Yes, of course, this comes part of the efforts to boost economic investment and growth, investment and economic growth in these countries. And you'll find that some of them are in the lower middle income category. So they have the potential to improve on that and become first proper middle income and later on the higher levels. So their cooperation is fruitful in that way, that they can help each other grow their economy, grow at higher growth rates towards achieving sustainable growth and development in their own countries.
Right. How does cooperation between these particular 8 countries really help to contribute to one another's economies?
Of course, through trade, as it says, the bilateral trade, you will find that mostly these countries have good potential to exchange commodities depending on their comparative advantage.
Right.
However, for one reason or the other, you will find them maybe with the Far East more, or with the European EU, European Union, or with the United States as the largest economy. There is more tendency to do business with these large countries, large economies, I mean. But there is also potential from within, to grow from within, by looking at the comparative advantage that each one may have, and working as a block of countries rather than individual countries on their own. This is helpful, of course, because they have similar background, not exactly the same, but similar background. They understand each other's economic problems. They can help each other in several ways in understanding the economic policies. There is no large discrepancies, for example.
Right.
All this helps, of course, in achieving the targets for trade and growth. The similar background, looking at the potential of each. I think these are the main reasons why it can be helpful to them.
Well, let me come back to you, Dr. Ahmed, perhaps ask you, because one of the agreements that came out of this meeting was to carry out joint projects in the automotive feeding industries and machineries and technology. Do you think that Egypt has both the required potential and the infrastructure to be able to compete with other D8 nations?
This has been a plan 2 years ago, before the Egypt Economic Development Conference. We were looking on improvement of power and infrastructure. And this phase was very important to proceed to the next phase, which is opening up to industry and manufacturing. And the feeding, small and medium and feeding industries, this is the hope for the future. This is the hope for the SMEs, the small and medium enterprise, to begin to generate more income, and for the improvement of the reduction in the unemployment and increase in the production and opening up the potential for exports.
Right. How important are SMEs to the economy? Do you think they're underestimated, their potential is underestimated?
Originally, the SMEs contributed to 5% of the GDP, and this is very low. The target is to increase the role of the SMEs to contribute to 20% of the GDP over the next 5 years. And coming back to the role of the D8, the D8 contributes to 3% of the global economy, and this was in 2010. Currently, it only contributes to 5% of the global economy, and the objective is to contribute to, by 2020, to 10% of the global economy. This is on the D8 level. In Egypt, we want to push the SMEs to have their prestigious role in the country to reduce unemployment, increase production, and focus on exports.
Let me ask the same question to Dr. Alaa. Do you think that we need to further boost the role or encourage further SMEs to grow and obviously take a greater role in boosting the economy in turn?
Yes, of course. Then about 90 or more % of the firms in most countries, not just the developing countries, even the developed ones, you will find them classified as small-scale enterprises. But it differs between the larger economies, where the small scale might be in the category of medium scale in, for example, a developing country such as Egypt. However, as a classification, what is small, whether in developing or developed countries, are the larger, they represents the larger share of firms in the economy. This means that they have first good potential to grow because they are small and they want to grow. So there's potential for economic growth through them, for employment creation, as Mr. Ahmed mentioned, for specializing in some export industries that may not need sophisticated equipment or technology, things similar to handicraft industries or so on. Some of the artisans and workshops, small workshops, have the ability to export some of their products abroad, and it can help the country in this way improve its balance of trade. The potential to be realized, you need good sources of finance, and this also tied to the collection of information about this type of firms. Now this is a problem here, because usually they don't have long track record in business. Their finance they might not be as substantial as the well-established medium and larger firms. However, some of them are good entrepreneurs, so they represent good investment opportunities. It's the role of the financier to distinguish these ones and to start to supply them with the credit they need to grow and to do their business. And this part needs good collection of information about these firms. So I think investment in information dissemination in different industries where there is small-scale enterprises at large scale will help a lot the financier and the growth potential of the country at large.
Right. Looking at the D8, Dr. Ahmed, we know that there are members of the grouping that now have political tensions with one another. How does that affect business?
It affects business at the country level. But when we talk about entrepreneurs and dealing into joint venture projects, it is not really affected because from those countries we have a lot of investments currently in Egypt. And they have their projects in Egypt, and they are willing to expand in their projects once they see a little bit of reduction in the tension. We need to segregate between the social level and the political level. We have seen socially people are very close, and people of the nations of the D8 are coming closer. We have seen particular countries in the D8 like Iran opening up to foreign investment and collaboration. Let's build on this example in particular because we have seen Iran absorbing $300 billion of investment from China.
Right.
And this is a plan that has been announced over the next 10 years. So we need to do the same in Egypt as well.
I'm wondering because obviously there's always the question if you collaborate in any way or another with Iran that you risk obviously straining ties with other countries, perhaps namely Saudi Arabia, because of the deep divisions that between those two countries. How do you think that could be overcome if you say that there's a lot of potential in a country like Iran and doing business with it?
We have to focus on the long-term objectives. We have some particular projects in Egypt that are open for collaboration. We have now focusing on the Suez Canal zone, and there are a lot of areas within the Suez Canal zone that can be set to particular cooperation with the different countries, and we need to open up this cooperation irrespective of tensions.
Right.
We have to focus on the business objectives and to realize return on investment and to focus on the improvement of the welfare for the people.
Let me ask Dr. Ala if he agrees. Do you agree that we should look beyond political frictions when it comes to doing business dealings?
Well, you can look at it that it's a kind of a vehicle, this business activities or business opportunities that can not be dividing countries, but can bring countries together in economic or business interest for investment and growth, trade cooperation, all of these positive attitudes for the economy. However, of course, we cannot neglect if there is deep political division, it will leave an impact, of course, on the prospects, on how deep the cooperation can be, and so on. But if we, and hopefully that if they are more business oriented, the common interest of these countries can bring their political views closer together, since they all have the same and they are living in the same region. There should be more economic cooperation for their quality of life in these countries and so on. So it will depend, of course, on how much they can compromise or make a balance, strike a balance between their political and economic interests.
Right.
It's hopeful that the economic interests are so bright, provides bright future for the people of this region to the extent that they can have better political cooperation among them, and not as dividing states, but collaborating states.
Right, well, let's broaden our discussion a little bit, and before we do that, let's take a look at the following report, and a closer look at the activities of the Ministry of Industry and Trade here in the country, and then we'll be back to discuss that.
Minister of Trade and Industry Tariq Qabil met with the British House of Lords to discuss means of cooperation in the field of investment between Egypt and Britain on one side and Egypt and Europe on the other side. During the meeting, Minister Qabil said that now is the most suitable time for the European partner to prove its support to Egypt in its war against terrorism, to pump new European investments and to reform the deficit of the trade balance. Qabil added that such cooperation would result into making quantum leap in the Egyptian-European economic and trade ties in the near future. The minister also stated that Egypt is keen on enhancing its economic joint relations with the European side. He added that Europe is considered as one of the most important trade partners to Egypt. These statements came during the meeting of Minister Qabil with British Baroness Elizabeth Simon, member of the British House of Lords, and the accompanying delegation. Minister Qabil also stated that Egypt seeks to create an atmosphere that attracts more investments. He added that the government has adopted a new economic reform system that includes amending some legislation as well as setting new ones to put an end to bureaucracy which hinders local and foreign investments. The minister also said that Egypt has witnessed a number of challenges throughout the previous years, adding that now is the most suitable time for the European partners to support Egypt, as this is considered as a cornerstone in achieving stability in the Middle East. Qabil also said that the Ministry of Trade and Industry has set a comprehensive strategy to develop industry and exports in order to boost the capabilities and potentials of Egyptian industrial sectors. For her part, Baroness Simon stressed on the keenness of her nation to bolster strategic ties with Egypt, as it is one of the pivotal nations in the Middle East and Africa. She added that achieving peace in the Middle East will have a huge impact on the stability and security of Egypt.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Dr. Ahmed, let me start off with you and perhaps how you see the recent efforts by the Ministry of Trade and Industry in obviously promoting the industrial sector here in the country.
It's a well-praised effort because we are seeing more and more of conventions and international conventions and cooperation with particular countries, then expanding the cooperation to particular zones and to particular agreements. What we need to see more is the establishment of what we call commercial and investment ambassadors. We need to see Egyptians, so entrepreneurs and also sponsors from the government, moving around the world and promoting the Egyptian exports. This has to go hand in hand with the local effort that we are doing here. We are seeing very good local effort on the ground, improvement of infrastructure, support from establishment of new economic zones, and facilitation a little bit of the hurdles from that face investment and commercial activities, but we need to see more activities outside.
Right. Again, the same question to you, Dr. Ali, how you see the efforts being taken by the Ministry of Trade and Industry to obviously boost the industrial sector here in the country.
Of course, from the news that we follow, that the government of Egypt at large and the Ministry of Industry and Trade included, there is good effort to make sure that the economic base of Egypt is diversified enough for a leap forward in the economy. So you will find the same happening in agriculture, in the services sector, in industry, all more or less with full-fledged efforts going in the country. The industrial zones that the country is keen to have in different parts of the country is again a good signal about the serious efforts for modernizing industries and make it in each local government in Egypt you can find an industrial zones or industrial activity. This is something positive, of course. We didn't have it as such. It was concentrated in large cities before. Now there is an expansion of that all over the country, nationwide. This is helpful because it will help with it. The labor training centers will find that the labor skills will start to improve in different parts of the country. So you can have a good pool of labor skills that you can depend on in growing with your industries from within. You don't have to be short of labor skills here or there that can postpone your plans or to depend on. For example, this is something important I see. The government is taking care of training centers for labor skills that goes hand in hand with the industrial development taking place in the country. So there are good signs, of course, and we see that there are serious efforts on that ground.
Right. Let me ask you, Dr. Ahmed, the areas that you think need to be further promoted or need to have more work done on.
We have noted some efforts, and there are 25 new planned industrial cities, and the strategy is to have 3,000 manufacturing facilities in those 25 zones. They are well spread around Egypt, but we need to see more focus on Upper Egypt. Upper Egypt is very important. If it's not developed quickly, it will create a sort of time bomb, because the expansion of unemployment in this particular area is huge, while there's a lot of resources and a lot of potential.
Right.
We have seen agriculture moving in Upper Egypt, which is good. The next phase comes agribusiness, which is industrial facilities that are related to agriculture. But we need to see more of technological business. We need to see more of heavy manufacturing in this particular area.
Earlier you mentioned that there were a lot of important cooperations that were established recently between Egypt and a number of countries. Perhaps what do you see as some of the most important of these cooperation agreements?
The most important one was the industrial zone for the feeding industries for the automobile, and this has been going on for 4 years, but now has been taking concrete actual steps on the ground to move it to a reality. And we have seen also some countries outside the D8, in particular China, that is also helping to build the infrastructure that is needed to build the industrial zones, because we had a shortage in infrastructure for the past 5 to 6 years, and we have done a good job over the past 2 years in the improvement, but we still need to attract foreign expertise in building infrastructure for the industry.
Right. Do you agree, Dr. Ala? That industry and that infrastructure and the development of that are some of the most important cooperations with foreign countries at the present time?
Okay, about the infrastructure. First, I mentioned in my answer to the previous related question that manpower is important.
Right.
This is extremely important. One of the main inputs for any production is manpower. And with good concern, good attention being paid at all levels in the government, actually, and especially in industry, for this will pay off well. The other thing, for example, energy is another important as a part of the infrastructure. So you can have human capital. You need other sources like energy, and also we are following the news that the government is paying good attention to that matter and increasing its capacity with one of the largest electricity projects taking place all over the world. The other infrastructure, of course, you need for if your production is for export oriented, then you need the ports, port cities, and so on. And we see that there's also good attention being paid to this. So the road network is being improved and still in progress, and this is again an important part of infrastructure development. So you see that there are good efforts actually taking place in terms of infrastructure. Of course, you can't do this all on your own. You need also assistance from at least in opening up opportunities for trade, for production, and having deals and agreements with the Western countries or the East Asian countries can be helpful a lot, because then it becomes meaningful why you invest in all this infrastructure. If you just concentrate on your own and be too narrow focused only on your own, maybe you are not going to grow as much as if you cooperate with larger economies and economies that have good experience in sectors in industrial sectors. And this is helpful, of course. Then there will be a good payoff from this mix between the infrastructure and the countries that you are going to tie yourself with to make advantage of the facilities that you have.
Right.
So I think the picture looked balanced.
Right. Perhaps the most recent visit was one paid by the British House of Lords to Egypt to boost obviously bilateral ties, bilateral economic ties in particular between Egypt and the United Kingdom, and in turn Egypt and the European Union or the other European countries. How did you see that particular visit, and what do you think was the most important outcome?
Yes, it comes part of the what we were saying, that foreign countries, being large or small, are looking for opportunities, business opportunities.
Right.
They want to diversify, for example, their investment portfolios, their industrial activity. They are seeking for the best return to their capital anywhere in the world. So if they think that a country like Egypt is providing, among other countries, is providing good investment opportunities to their capitalists, and they are willing to invest in it, then you will hear from them that we are willing to do business with this country. This is part of the cooperation that's happening, and both have business interests,
right.
The Egyptian side and the British side. And this happens all over with all countries, not just Egypt. But the new thing here is that Egypt is providing good investment opportunities. The potential is there. So you will find that these large economies will be interested and watching the progress you are making, and would like to share with you this story of success with good expectations, in business.
Right.
So that's how I look at it.
Do you agree, Dr. Ahmed, is that how you see things, or how do you think British-Egyptian cooperation, especially economic, can be improved or has improved after this particular visit?
It's in line with the general trend that we have seen from the cooperation between the two countries now. Egypt is becoming more and more important in the region, which is now, we are now approaching more stability and opening up for international investment. We had a problem, but this problem created the best opportunity for us. We have underdevelopment in many sectors, and this underdevelopment attracts investment which caters and targets for growth. But we have been also moving beyond this point in attracting investments, and we have seen Egyptian products like buses, for example, being exported to London, and this is the first step. But we hope to see more and more products being exported to London, and we need to see also more cooperation on the defense side, because we have been importing a lot of weaponry from many nations, but we need to see it also from the United Kingdom as well.
Egypt has become, or has been named, the second largest economy in the African continent. How do you think that that's going to affect business and investment?
We see that it's a good opportunity. This is after some disruptancy for South Africa, and we are now number 2 after Nigeria, which is the biggest economy by GDP in Africa. This is always an opportunity, but we need to prove that we are open up for investments. Those are not words. We need to have concrete investment opportunities that provide huge return. We need to remove totally obstacles in front of foreign investors, and we need to work on resolution of the issues that are now facing investors that are currently in the country.
Right.
We need not only focus on attracting new FDI, while we have issues and problems with some investors that are working in our country here. We need to focus on elimination of the problems and then move to the next phase.
What are some of these key problems do you think that investors in the country face and potential investors also face?
There is one chronic issue that has been not tackled so far, which is the repatriation of the profits and dividends. This was mainly because of the forex issue and inavailability of the foreign currency, but we need to see this easing out gradually over the next period, because now we have the foreign exchange rate moving towards a realistic rate. And this has been the first step that was very important.
Right.
Having a realistic exchange rate increases the trust in the central bank, and the next step is working on the availability of foreign currency. The third step, which we are now heading and moving to, is having an established system for profits repatriation.
Right. Okay, Dr. Ali, obviously something that Dr. Ahmed mentions is realistic exchange rates. Now, maybe it might sound good to the foreign investor, but Egyptians aren't too pleased with the quote-unquote realistic exchange rate. How do you create a balance between attracting foreign investments and obviously not affecting the livelihood of the average Egyptian due to the increase or the decrease of the Egyptian pound against the dollar?
You see, the bottom line here is to let market forces be prevalent. So the demand and supply forces should determine prices. Otherwise, you will be faced with bottlenecks and with a bureaucratic management of something that can be better left to market forces.
Right.
And eventually you see that the government needs to intervene and makes correction at high cost later on. So better to leave it to market forces. The problem is, in the case of exchange rate in Egypt in particular, that it doesn't just reflect the market forces. There are what we can call other noises in the system that makes this exchange rate beyond what the experts, officials, and close followers of the exchange market conditions in Egypt would agree on. Now, here we need to be on two tracks, to work on two tracks. First, making sure that demand and supply is the main policy for determination of exchange rate. At the same time, the government has to take, the central bank in particular, has to take all measures, and it is taking all measures to make sure that the illegal transactions are being kept to a minimum or totally withdrawn from the economy. Maybe we are not able to do this at the moment, but at least we should keep it to the minimum possible level. Now, if on that, then the foreign investors would like to make sure that there will be no sudden changes, drastic changes in the exchange rate system. So if you are not allowing market forces to work normally, then, as I said, you might face conditions where you have to make costly and large corrections later on. This distort their calculations. So we better to be more transparent on our market conditions, and at the same time, if there are other reasons for the exaggerated exchange rate, we should put more attention, or pay more attention, put more effort in bringing this in line with market, what will be the fair market price for our the international value of the Egyptian pound. At the same time, you can give incentives to foreign investors who are going to commit large capital outlays, for example. You can give them a kind, as what we have seen in the kind of options to the short-term investors for exchange rate, that they making sure that when they repatriate their profits or their return on their short-term investment in the government securities, they will have it at predetermined exchange rates, so they don't face exchange risk. You can have something similar for FDIs and those who are willing to commit large capital outlays, that you can give them a kind of this option. And this option can come not just by administrative decisions. It can be by market tools or products, financial products, can take a form of financial products. So there are ways that to give protection or insurance to large investors that the return on their profit will remain safe and not risk too much of the valuation of the Egyptian pound or changes in their calculation of the exchange rate, impact on their profits and so on.
Okay, let me ask Dr. Ahmed about something that Dr. Alaa mentioned, and the importance of transparency. How do you think it's important, or to what extent is its importance at this time?
Transparency is very important, and it's important on many fronts. Transparency increases the trust, and trust increases the amount of inflow of foreign direct investment, because it balances out the risk and return from investment. Erratic changes and haphazard changes cause a lot of mistrust. Will it be in the central bank or the government at large, or do you need to see a concrete plan being announced and being followed? And whenever there are changes, the changes are gradual and pre-announced.
Right. Overall, sir, how do you see the status of the Egyptian economy at present, and how do you think improvements can be made?
We are a little bit moving out of a bottleneck. We see the bottleneck at the end of 2016. This is like the ultimate target from many projects in infrastructure and power. So next we will see some projects that are related to production and services. So they will start having impact on the people. So this will ease out the tension that's happening in the economy, and will increase the cycle of cash flow.
Right, and the same question to you in summation, Dr. Alaa. How do you see the status of the Egyptian economy, and where do you think improvements can be made at present?
Okay, if you look at the expected rate of economic growth, it's about 4%, in the range of 4%. And if you look back 2-3 years ago, it was 1 to 3 in this range. Didn't exceed the most optimistic expectation, didn't exceed 3%. So now I think we are moving on the right direction. With the good investments in infrastructure that the government is implementing, we expect more payoff from these infrastructure projects in terms of industrial, agricultural, and the services activity. So you have a diversified economic base, potential of economic growth, you have a good investment map that is nationwide, so we can only be optimistic. That's how I see it.
Hopefully so. I thank you very much, gentlemen, both of you, for coming in tonight. Dr. Alaa Shazli, Professor of Economics, it was a pleasure having you with us. Dr. Ahmed Abdul Mughni, Finance and Investment Expert, thank you very much for coming in. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. We do come your way again tomorrow, same time, same place, with my colleague Monam Selhi. Until then, it's goodbye from me. Thank you.